Welcome to Zeitgeist Radio, the podcast for music lovers to expand their horizons into new and interesting musical subcultures. I'm your host, Morgan Rowe, founder of the Zeitgeist Academy. Each episode, I interview someone from a different musical community. Zeitgeist means spirit of the times, and my goal is to make that spirit come alive for you and help you appreciate musical communities you may not know much about. Before we get into the episode, head over to zeitgeistacademy.com/radio. You can see episodes and transcripts and also sign up for my newsletter. There's always more to a topic than can be covered in one conversation, so each week I send a deeper dive into something related to the topic. You'll also be able to access the archives to see past content. That's zeitgeist academy.com/radio. My guest today is Nate Cutshall, a harp tech from Central Pennsylvania. Nate, welcome to Zeitgeist Radio.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm really happy to talk to you. This is going to be a really fun conversation for me. I don't play harmonica, but my dad kind of has dabbled. And so I have a lot of questions. He's definitely like a beginner, but has got the soul into it. So I think this is going to be a really informative conversation. I'm going to definitely send it to him. Hi, Dad.
Yeah, I feel like everybody has a dad or a grandfather that plays the harmonica.
Yeah,
like
nice.
The quality of the instrument.
Well, let's get first into some background. Can you explain to our listeners who you are musically?
So I am people tend to know me as a harmonica player, but I'm also a songwriter and a guitar player. I also play the piano, and I play in a band called Ma'am, based out of Central Pennsylvania. And I also have a band of my own that I'm more of a front person. That's called the Scrapplers. We are a new band. Our first show is going to be June 9th.
Nice.
So what is today? The 3rd. So we're just coming up on that.
Nice.
I'm really excited for that. And yeah, I build and repair harmonicas. I teach lessons as well. So yeah, just a multidisciplinary person in the music industry.
Yeah. Sounds like you have a lot of things we could talk about, but we are here today to talk about harmonica. I think it would help set the stage if you could explain at a basic level. I think everyone's heard harmonica, but can you explain what it actually is and how? I mean, I know we can get super granular here, but on a really basic level, how does a harmonica work? Kind of in the first place? Can we set the stage for that?
Sure. So the harmonica was designed based on the diatonic accordion, which is there's two types of accordions. Well, there's probably a bunch of variations, but the two main types are the accordion with the piano keyboard that probably most people think of initially, or maybe haven't even noticed that difference specifically, but there's either the accordion with the piano keyboard, which is chromatic and you can play classical music and jazz on that, or the folk accordion, which just has buttons. Mm-hmm. And the folk accordion is tuned to a diatonic scale as opposed to a chromatic scale. And the harmonica was designed based on that. So instead of using the bellows, the in and out motion of the accordion, in which case that accordion, it plays one chord when you go in and it plays an entirely different chord when you go out, which is the same thing as the harmonica. It plays one chord when you draw in and one chord when you blow out, and it's based on that diatonic accordion. So roughly around the year 1825, harmonicas started to appear in Germany and France. They sort of argue over who invented it, but it was most likely Germany that harmonicas were invented. And initially they were made by just independent people. There's no factories. So early on, a lot of watchmakers had the tools to work on, the small and delicate reeds. And then in the 1850s, Hohner opened the first harmonica factory. So the way that the harmonica works is basically there's a spring. If you think about one of those spring door stops, You know how if you like flick the spring, it makes a note, basically? That's sort of how a metal reed works in a harmonica, and it is activated by air, obviously. So the reed is placed, it is riveted on one end over a slot, and when you draw air through the slot, it activates the reed. Is basically the mechanic.
Man, I learned so much just now. First of all, it's interesting because my exposure is so American. So, like, of course, when I think about the big harmonica maker names that I know, they are more German. But
Yeah,
I
yeah,
picture the
totally.
harmonica being such an American instrument. Like it and the blues are so tied together
For
in
sure.
my head. It's interesting that it didn't even come from there, from us. It's came
Yeah.
over from Germany or France.
Well, I would definitely say it's an American instrument because the harmonica never really caught on in Germany.
Yeah.
It's pretty uncommon. There's not really, I'm sure there's some German harmonica music, and I can certainly play some German songs on the harmonica, but it never really caught on there. It did catch on though in the United States, and it sort of replaced uh, another wind instrument called the quills, which is like a type of pan flute.
Okay.
If you've ever seen, it's like basically like a collection of tubes, and there's like a short one, and they get progressively longer until there's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
longer
yeah.
one, and people would play these pan flutes
Yeah,
as
yeah.
a wind instrument, and the harmonica is tuned to a very similar scale as the quills. So, folk musicians in the 1800s and early 1900s would play the quills, and the harmonica sort of replaced that. It was also really common for people to carry a harmonica in the Civil War as Civil War soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and basically by I think the statistic I forget exactly what the numbers are, but by the year roughly 1910, I think they were selling 10 to 20 million harmonicas a year in the
Whoa.
United States. A lot. Yeah, they were selling a lot. And it was like
Whoa.
common, like the famous bluegrass guitar player, Doc Watson. He said that he got a harmonica every year for Christmas when he was a kid, which I think was like a pretty common move for parents.
Yeah.
Um, and there's all different keys of harmonicas. So, you need one for the key of G and one for the key of A and one for A sharp. So it's nice you get one a year until you complete the set, right? It's sort of like the
Yeah.
the story.
Yeah. Let's actually go into that. We'll jump ahead a little. Because that is something I find fascinating. Again, watching my dad try to like learn. I think he picked it up when he was driving trucks because it was so portable.
Yeah,
And
totally.
he could just like go park on a hill at a break and play for a little bit. So he's got really good intuition around it, but eventually he started wanting to learn more about the music theory generally, and then the music theory specifically for harmonicas. So can you
Hmm.
explain that a little bit, because it was a little complex as far as like choosing, like how to choose, like if you're playing in the key of G, do you choose a G harmonica or a D harmonica? Like what do you
Yes,
choose for that?
that's a good question. So, you could play in the key of G with a G harmonica, which makes a lot of sense. Seems very intuitive. But then there's also some alternate positions that you can play in. So there's one position called cross harp, which is the most common position for blues. And um, if if you're playing straight harp, which is first position, that would be playing a G harmonica in the key of G. Uh, your main notes will be blow notes, and then the draw notes are sort of like the color notes or the extra notes to fill the spaces in. But if you play cross harp or second position, then your main notes are going to be the draw notes or the draw chord. So on a G harmonica, that would be a D7 chord. It would actually be a D9 chord. So it sort of changes in in music theory. They call it like the tonal gravity or like the tonal center. And if you focus on the draw chord, then it has a little bit of a different feeling. It sort of has that more bluesy kind of um it lends itself to more bluesy melodies. And then beyond that, there's a number of minor positions. There's third position, fourth position, and fifth position, which would be on a G harp, you could play that in A minor, that would be third position. You could play it in B minor, that would be fourth position, or you could play it in E minor, which would be fifth position. And there's some other positions beyond that, but those are the most common ones that I use. And yeah, it's
Yeah.
each
So with
position
that
just has
with
like
that
a different
first
melody.
is that first position, I'm guessing that's because you get that nice, basically it's a 5/7 chord for music theory folks, or like a leading chord going back into the G. Would that be the purpose of, like, the theoretical
Right.
purpose of doing
That's
that?
exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then the
yeah.
minor
Yeah.
ones, I'd
So
have
if
to
you
think
play,
on that for on the theory of it for a little bit of the minor ones. The E is the relative minor of G, so that one makes
that's right.
sense.
Yep, because they share
Um,
all the same notes, right?
y'all go sign up for my newsletter. I'll break this down.
Yeah. And
There's too
then
much in this conversation.
the A minor would be the Dorian mode, which would be like a song like the folk song Shady Grove. There's different songs that use that mode, or the fourth position, which if you think about the cross harp that I was telling you about, right, which would be playing a G harmonica in D. Well, the relative minor of D is B minor. So it sort of gives you the
Okay,
relative minor of the five chord.
got it. So
It's all too many numbers and letters, but
I know so many.
there's some options there. There's some options there. It's sort of a brain bender for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I get why he was trying to learn about it, because that definitely sounds like each of those. Okay, so I'm interrupting myself. I have too many thoughts going on at once. Um, is it always true that the draw breath is a nine chord?
Yes, if you were to play the entire thing, but you can avoid those notes and sort of fool
Sure,
the listener, and make it not sound like a ninth chord.
sure. But your range of notes will be a nine.
Yeah.
So it'll be nine notes to how many notes are on each side?
Okay, so the blow chord is just three notes over and over and over again. It's like
Okay,
like tuned like a bugle.
right.
Okay, so it's just like just a major chord going up three octaves. And then the draw chord is a ninth chord, which is five different notes. And um so there's 10 holes, so each side has 10 notes, and the blow side has, it's all the major chord, and then the draw side is 10 notes of the minor chord also going up three octaves.
Nice. Wow. I knew this was going to be interesting. And you're like, this is so basic. I haven't even got to the good stuff yet.
Oh no, it's all interesting to me.
uh, when did you first pick up a harmonica?
So I got really into the blues when I first started taking guitar lessons. I was really into like Pink Floyd and the Beatles and like Led Zeppelin, all the classic stuff that uh you know people tend to know and get them interested in the guitar. And then when I got into Jimi Hendrix is really rooted in the blues, and uh, it was sort of like changed overnight. I started listening to Jimi Hendrix, and then I started listening to Jimi Hendrix's influences like Muddy Waters and Buddy Guy, and just went deep on the blues. So I got really into the blues, and maybe about 6 months later, I bought my first harmonica and I tried to play it, and I gave up pretty quickly, to be honest with you. It's sort of mysterious. There's not,
Mm.
it's not like the guitar where you can see what someone's hands are doing. There's a lot hidden, with the harmonica. Um, but I was really fortunate to after I tried to play it once. I gave up for maybe about 6 months, and then I picked it up again and maybe messed around with it for a week and gave up again. But then maybe the third time that I picked it up, I found a really great teacher on YouTube. His name is Adam Gusso, and he has a channel called Modern Blues Harmonica. He's a really great harmonica player. He was a street musician in New York City for a while, and he has these amazing um these amazing YouTube lessons that he started publishing in like 2009 maybe.
Nice.
And that's really how I started to get some of the basic techniques. And really, when you first start playing, there's like, to be able to play the blues, there's like one or two techniques, specifically the technique of bending, which
Hmm.
is manipulating the pitch of a note. Uh, that can be a little difficult to learn initially. So it's sort of a like a steep mountain that you climb. You know, you can play some like basic Bob Dylan style harmonica maybe when you first get it, but then to start getting those notes on purpose, you got to learn how to bend, which is why I kept giving up. But then I learned how to bend through that YouTube channel, and yeah, it was on. It was on from there. And that
Nice.
bending quality is really what gives the harmonica. It makes it sound like someone's singing, you know. It's you can be very expressive when you can manipulate the pitch of a note and put vibrato and you know sort of make the note curl or make it cry or whatever. That's really what grabs people, I think, when they hear a great harmonica player.
Yeah. So okay, so then when at what point did you start tinkering with the insides and getting like interested in building?
Yeah. So I was trying to play the guitar. I'll just sort of give my background on how I got there. I was trying to play the guitar and I was playing the harmonica and people started to know me more as a harmonica player than a guitar player because there's so many guitar players and not a lot of great harmonica players. Which I got lucky, you know, that I picked that instrument. So eventually, when I moved to the State College area in Central PA, people started asking me if I knew of the local harmonica legend Richard Slay, who's became my mentor. And the way that that happened was I sort of tracked him down at the farmers market. Is all very wholesome. He
Nice.
publishes a weekly newsletter, and he, you know, I sort of tracked him down on his website and found his newsletter, and he said he loves playing at the farmers market, playing for his neighbors and stuff like that. So I was like, I'm gonna go I'm gonna go find this guy and see what he's about. And he's just playing in the corner, all very unassuming, and he was playing the harmonica on the neck rack while he was playing the guitar, and it was like the best harmonica playing that I've ever heard in my life, and he was doing it while he was playing the guitar, which was also blowing my mind to see that in person, you know. So I must have just been staring at him because looked at me and pretty much clocked what I was about immediately, and he asked if I played the harmonica. That was like the first question that he asked me. And I said, he was like, "What are you doing? What are you doing? Do you play the harmonica or something?" Yeah, sure I do. And the second question he asked me was, "Well, do you have one with you?" And sure enough, I did. It's one of the benefits of having a, you know, a small portable instrument. And the third question he asked me is, "What key is it in? And do you want to play a song?" So he had me within about, you know, 30 seconds of talking to me. We were playing music together, and I guess I did well enough that he invited me back to his house for dinner, and his wife wife and daughters were there, and I had a really nice dinner with them. They're all very sweet people, and I basically told him I would love to learn from you, and you know, we worked out a sort of Mr. Miyagi style apprenticeship situation. Um, and Richard Slay is a world renowned harmonica tech. He has a lot of influence on the design of the modern harmonica. He sort of invented a lot of the techniques and tools that people commonly use now to work on their harmonicas. Um, I'm not I'm not sure that I would have been drawn towards that or figured it out without his guidance.
Sure.
Um, I didn't even know that that was possible before that. Usually, the you know, the harmonica is kind of cheap, uh, which is awesome. It makes it very accessible to people, but also it's cheap enough that when the harmonica breaks, people tend to just throw it away. And now in the modern day, um, you know, there's people build some really high quality harmonicas, and if you spend a lot of money on a high quality harmonica, you don't want to throw it away when it's broken. You want to fix it. So that's sort of the influence that Richard has had on the whole world of the harmonica and on me personally as well.
Wow, that's amazing that you moved to a town where there's a world class, like world
So
class.
lucky, just 10
That's
minutes up the
amazing.
road. That's
Yeah.
sometimes the
Um,
universe smiles kindly upon us.
yeah. So how big of this community of harmonica players are we talking? Like how I think the first time I met you, you were either on your way or you had just come back from a convention.
That's right.
Um, so like what are we talking like a couple big names? Are we talking lots and lots of names? How big is this world that you live in here?
Um, well, it's tough to say because there's um so many people have a harmonica
Yeah.
and so many people dabble in the harmonica, and then a certain number of those people maybe played a little more seriously, and then an even smaller number of them, have been able to play it professionally, and just so on when you keep narrowing it down. But what I can say is the conference that I went to, which is called SPA, it stands for the Society for the Protection and Advancement of the Harmonica, which is hilarious. Um, this was in 2022. So, still kind of pandemic times.
Mm-hmm.
And the conference that year was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was just a national conference, although some people traveled internationally. But at that conference, I believe that there was um, maybe 300 people, a few hundred people, give or take. I would say 250 to 400. It's tough to remember exactly. But again, that was during the pandemic times. I know that a lot of people were discouraged from attending for that reason. And obviously in the amount of people that go to the harmonica conference is smaller than it's just representative of how big the community is. Um,
Well, it's big enough to have a conference, which I didn't know before I met you either.
yeah, totally. Totally.
And then you've mentioned at least one brand. Would you say that there's um, more harmonica brands or individual makers? Like who's out there making these?
Sure. There's three large manufacturers of the harmonica right now. One is Hohner.
Hmm.
I play pretty much exclusively Hohner harmonicas. There's another one, Seidel, which is also a German company, and Seidel was actually the very first harmonica factory, I think, in the early 1850s, and then Hohner started their factory in 1857, I believe, and that's really the one that took off. The Seidel factory has stuck around, um, but the Hohner factory is really the sort of like the industry standard. And then in Japan, the company Suzuki makes a really nice harmonica as well. And then there's a number of cheap harmonica manufacturers beyond that, but it's those three companies. And then now in the modern times, there's a number of like independent harmonica techs, like like my mentor Richard Slay and like myself, who they would buy their parts from one of those companies, so Hohner, Seidel, or Suzuki, and then they would, custom build some higher end harmonicas that aren't just mass manufactured. And then there's been one or two other companies. There's this guy Lee Oscar. He started a harmonica company. Um, I would say that those harmonicas are a little subpar from my experience. Then there was a guy who tried to I think it was called Harrison Harmonicas, and his company folded. But he was an American-based harmonica manufacturer. Same with
Yeah, it's
Lee
interesting
Oscar.
that these three big ones you named, none of them are in the States. And again, associate this instrument so much with American music. It's interesting that none of them are
Sure.
based here.
Yeah. In the modern times, though, there are a lot of really great harmonica players around the world playing a really wide variety of music. Irish music. There's some amazing harmonica players from India and the Middle East. There's some really great African harmonica players. There's really amazing harmonica players in Japan and China and just all over the world. And then I guess I should also mention the harmonica I play is the diatonic harmonica. But at some point, they invented this harmonica called the chromatic harmonica, which
Sure.
is more similar to the accordion with the piano. And that's more for playing like classical music and jazz. And there's great harmonica players all over the world that play the chromatic harmonica as well.
Wow. I've never seen that would be an interesting concert to see a classical harmonica player.
Yeah.
Um, so what would distinguish, in your opinion, from like how, if you look at a harmonica, what tells you that it's more of a high quality or high end harmonica versus less so?
Um, Well, the best way to tell is to try to play it. It's sort of mostly the things that are happening under the hood that make the biggest difference. But the comb of the harmonica, which is the piece in the middle, um, that's one thing to look for. A nicer harmonica will have like a nicer comb that's sealed or maybe made out of a nicer material like Richard Slay's made combs out of corian. People will make them out of brass. But the standard harmonica comb is made out of kind of like a pear wood, which is like a pretty cheap, lightweight wood, kind of almost similar to balsa wood.
So would
And
that
those
be the thing
harmonicas,
that the springs are attached to, the comb?
uh, no, okay. So the springs, which we'll call them reeds, which the reeds they act like springs. They are attached to the reed plates, and the reed plates are attached to the cone.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm a piano player, and in the
Hmm.
piano world, the soundboard of the piano is kind of everything. That's going to determine the resonance in
Ah,
the
yes.
chamber. So is the comb kind of acting as a soundboard, a mini soundboard in the middle? Uh, does it contribute to the resonance um, and kind of the sound that you get out of it in a similar way?
Absolutely. Yeah, it does. It is tough to tell just by eye,
Yeah.
because really what a lot of the upgrades made to the harmonica to make a really high-end harmonica are about making it very airtight. And
Mm,
these are like not quite microscopic leaks. They're
sure.
like you can it's difficult to see with the naked eye where the harmonica is leaking. There's we use light and magnification to make the harmonica more airtight, which is the thing that makes it more responsive and more resonant.
Interesting. Okay, so you've got the comb. That's one thing that you look for. Are there other things that you look for as well?
Um, yeah, the most common one is the standard marine band, which is the most common harmonica in history, established in the late 1800s by Hohner and still manufactured and sold and loved by great harmonica players all around the world today. Um, that harmonica is put together with nails. So one of the first things that you do if you're going to try to upgrade one of those harmonicas is take out all the nails and replace them with screws. So
Okay.
that's like a tell if the harmonica has if it's a marine band harmonica that has the nails replaced with screws, then you know that somebody has done work on it.
Interesting. And that I assume also makes it airtight. Like that's the purpose of the screws. Is they're more airtight?
Yeah, it allows you to control that a little bit more for sure.
Nice. We got into a lot of music theory here. Thank you so much for sticking with us through this. After each episode of this podcast, I write a corresponding newsletter on something related to the topic. This coming week, I'll give you a nice and simple breakdown of this theory discussion so that you can send it to anyone you know who plays harmonica and, like my dad, can get a little confused about what key harmonica to choose when playing a song. I'll also put in some pictures of these internal parts so it's a little easier to visualize what Nate is talking about. You can receive that email by going to zeitgeistacademy.com/radio. And if you're listening to this later, you're in luck. You can access transcripts of all older newsletters and see the content I've already sent. So yeah, go sign up. zeitgeistacademy.com/radio. So we've talked about a couple genres and how design may have changed a little bit. Do you play different harmonicas in different genres, or like how much does the genre you're playing influence the harmonica you choose?
That's a great question. The biggest difference is if you're playing the diatonic or the chromatic harmonica.
Sure.
Um, but you can play either harmonica in a variety of styles. I almost exclusively play the diatonic harmonica, and with the diatonic harmonica, I play uh blues, country music, rock and roll. You can play some jazz music depending on what the melody is. I play Irish music. Um, I play old time fiddle music. You can play some polkas. There's a bunch of stuff that you can play on the diatonic harmonica. On the chromatic harmonica, that lends itself more to jazz and classical music.
Nice. So that's pretty much those two. And then when you're styling, it would just be in techniques that you would use. You've talked about bending. Are there other techniques that you use based on whatever you're playing?
Sure. Yeah, yeah. There's this technique, it's called tongue blocking, which is you might have your mouth open over three or four holes at the same time, and then while you are playing, you will use your tongue to block off some of those notes, so you can go between playing an individual note and playing a chord, or you can sometimes play two notes at once as like a split where your tongue would be in the middle and you're playing one note out of the left side of your mouth and one note out of the right side of your mouth. And that technique, it's used in a lot of different styles of music in various ways.
That sounds really hard.
Yeah, it's interesting.
um, let's talk about go into building a little bit. So you call yourself a
Sure.
harp tech. And you
Yep.
also mentioned before we started recording, so a luthier is a term that's used for people who build guitars, also
Right.
violins, kind of working with wood. And you mentioned that's also a term that can be used. Um, so what's it like to be a harp tech, and what does your day look like when you like? What kind of tools do you use? Just what's that like for you?
Um, it's very interesting. It's a unique experience. All the tools that I use are basically handmade, customized tools
Wow.
that Richard made, or sometimes we repurpose tools for, to specialize them on the harmonica. There might be some modification to the tool to make it more specific to use on the harmonica. Um, and
I'm picturing
they're
like dental tools. Like they're probably
pretty
very
similar.
fine. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you're spot on with that. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't want people to work on my teeth with the harmonica tools, but I could see that you could mistake them for sure.
Yeah. So do you make custom mostly, or do you like what do you do if you're making for someone else?
So it tends to be at least my preferred way if I'm going to build a harmonica for someone is just to build them a new harmonica, so that way I know all the work that was done to it, and I'll set myself up to repair that harmonica in the future,
Yeah.
which a good harmonica can last quite a long time if the player has good technique. You might need to get it repaired once every 2 to 5 years. Sometimes they can go longer. It just depends on how much you use it and how hard you play it. Um, but yeah, I would try to build them a harmonica from scratch, and mostly the process is if it's like a new marine band, I would replace all the nails with screws. I would flatten everything, which makes it all very airtight. And then I would go to work on the individual reeds. So, like I said, there's 10 holes on the harmonica, and 10, 10 reeds for when you blow out and 10 reeds for when you draw in. So that's 20 reeds in total, and each one requires some special attention. Uh, we'll look at the shape of the reed, how the reed is sitting on the reed plate to make sure that it's airtight and activating equally all along the reed. It's basically like a thin strip of metal, so you'll sort of look at both sides of the reed and see how the reed is sitting on the reed plate. And then at the end, you'll tune all the reeds. And oftentimes, when you get the harmonica from the factory, it'll be in tune enough to play, and most people wouldn't notice it being out of tune. But a really nice high-end custom harmonica is really crispy in its tuning, and people notice that immediately.
How do you tune that? Do you file away at the like what does that look? How do you do that?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So to make the reed go sharp, you remove some metal from the tip of the reed with a jeweler's file or another type of file. And to make it go flat, you can either add metal to the tip of the reed with like with solder is a common tool, or you can remove some metal from the base of the reed, which would make the spring looser, right?
Hmm.
So that
Sure.
would also make the pitch go flat.
Huh, that's interesting. Um, again, when reeds, so coming from the classical world mostly, I know a lot of reeds like players like oboe and clarinet, those types.
Right.
So I'm picturing like how they, the very little that I know about how they tune, um, but seems like they're always making new reeds and having to
Yeah.
replace them
Okay.
kind
So
of
that's a
constantly.
that's a very different type of reed instrument.
Yeah.
It's a wooden reed,
Right, right.
and they manipulate the pitch that they're playing by with the buttons on their instrument, which lengthens or shortens
Yeah.
the resonant pitch of the instrument. Whereas with the harmonica, it's an individual reed for each note, so it's a little different.
Yeah, totally. It sounds very, very totally different. I
Yeah.
just am thinking of like again, my um it's such an interesting way to make sound. Um it's really kind of a brilliant design. So with all those little
Totally.
parts, I'm actually kind of surprised that they last very long. It seems like those reeds, I guess you have to be very careful about not bumping them to get things out of place. Like what do you see? What is the most common damage that you see?
Um, they're actually pretty sturdy, to be honest with
Yeah.
you. Uh, and a lot of the work that a harmonica tech does is also to sort of settle the harmonica, which is most of the time, I mean, I might spend uh 5 to 10 hours working on a harmonica, but I'll do that over the period of 2 months. And a lot of it is, I'll do all the initial work, maybe couple few hours, and then I'll let the harmonica sit for a couple weeks, and then I'll pick it up, I'll test it again. Uh, Everything will certainly have moved, and I'll adjust that stuff, put it down, and I'll do that like 4 or 5 times. And that's really the thing that keeps the harmonica stable for a longer period of time. Um, the most common damage is like if uh, if you hold your harmonica too tightly, you can crush the cover plates, which isn't it doesn't always affect the playability of the harmonica, but it does affect the it affects the shape of it. It's not the biggest deal, but we when we build a higher end harmonica, we reinforce it so it's harder to crush with your hands. Um, Another common one is if the harmonica gets wet,
Mm-hmm.
that can be damaging. And one of the most common ways to increase the life of your harmonica is after you play it, you don't want to just close it up in a box. You want
Ah,
to when you get home, you want to let it air out, and that way, the wooden parts of the harmonica won't absorb that moisture. They'll dry out, and the reeds won't corrode. You don't want uh any saliva or other liquid to be sitting on the harmonica
that
for
makes
an
a
extended
lot of
period of time.
sense. So, what is left that's wood? So, we talked about if you're customizing a high end, you replace the comb with like brass or something. And
Sure.
then you mentioned that the reeds are metal and they're strapped to a metal plate or is attached to a metal plate. So what's
Hmm.
left that's wood?
Just the comb, and honestly, I play mostly wood comb
Oh,
harmonicas,
okay.
but the combs that I use are of higher quality wood and they're better sealed.
Got it. Okay.
But you can also use like acrylic is another common one for the combs. But yeah, the wood combs are still common even in the higher end ones.
Okay.
Just a nicer quality of wood.
Got it. And then on I'm trying to picture. I should have brought mine with me. The ones I've seen, the holes, is that wood in between? Like what is made in between, and how are those um shaped? Is that ever customized? Like how big the holes are for like if someone's got like a really small mouth or a big mouth. I don't know. It seems like if there's a very big person trying to play this tiny instrument, it could be a problem.
Sure, they can vary a little bit, but they're pretty consistent in the size of the holes. The chromatic harmonicas are a little bigger, but the reason that we call it the comb is because it looks like a comb.
I'll put a
So
picture of that in my newsletter. It looks like a comb.
when you put reed plates on the other side, then they look like holes or slots, but really, it's a comb. And then when you put the reed plates on, then it looks like they're holes.
Sure.
Did that
Amazing.
answer your question?
Yes, I think so.
Cool. It's such a
So
mysterious little instrument.
it
It's
is,
so
yeah.
funny.
I really love what you said about how it's like internal, it's not something that you can look at it and figure out how to do it. And I think I do, there's been a couple times where, I've been inspired by my dad or whatever. I'll be like, I might try to learn how to play this. And
Hmm.
piano is what I grew up on. It's the most visual instrument, right? It's so
Sure.
visual.
Yeah,
Every
yeah.
note you can just, what do you want to play? You look at it and you play it. Guitar is
Sure.
a little less so, but it's still very visual. Once you know the chord shapes and the tunings, you can pretty much figure that out.
Totally.
Harmonica, what would you say to someone who's like interested in dabbling, gotten that point where you got stuck, maybe got frustrated, set it aside, but it's kind of in the back of their head, like, this is something I'd like to do. Like, what is some advice you would give to someone interested in picking it up?
There are amazing teachers all over the internet, and there's a lot of free lessons on YouTube if you're, able to teach yourself with, some how-to manuals. That's basically how I did it for a while. But having a good teacher can make a difference, and through teaching the harmonica, I've definitely, there's a lot of like metaphors and explanations that we use for what's going on behind the scenes that, I definitely can help someone make progress quite quickly if they're willing to practice.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I way back in Portland several years ago, I was running a music school up there and we had someone come in wanting lessons, and I was like, wow, this is a new one. And I searched in my community and I'm like, I don't run in these circles, and also they weren't online. I couldn't find anyone for this person, so I ended up just referring them to YouTube, which um is a great place to start. Obviously, there's a place for person, one-on-one lessons too, but
Hmm.
it's not as common to find them as there's a piano or a guitar teacher on every corner, but not so much with harmonica.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, one of the common things is with the tongue blocking. A lot of people start off, excuse me, by lip pursing, which means that you basically make like a fish face to like get the individual isolated notes. Um, and if you're lip pursing and you listen to a great harmonica player, you might wonder how are they getting all those extra notes?
Yeah.
And a lot of it is through tongue blocking, which means that you're able to use your tongue and sort of play multiple notes at once and play counter melodies and counter rhythms, which wouldn't be immediately obvious without someone giving you some insight into the instrument.
Yeah, I'm picturing Blues Traveler who just goes at the speed of light.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I think he mostly lip purses, but he definitely tongue blocks sometimes.
Do you have a vest like he does?
No, I don't.
It's like a military vest with all the pockets for
Yeah,
each of his
I
harmonicas.
just got a nice nice suitcase.
Nice.
Yeah. Or like a
Awesome.
briefcase rather.
Um, well, Nate, this has been awesome. Is there any final advice or any things that you'd like to share that we haven't touched on that you encounter in your day to day?
I mean, if someone wants to learn how to play the harmonica, the best thing to do is just keep it on your person at all times. It's a
Oh,
small instrument, and the more that you have it with you, the more often you're going to play it. And that's certainly how I got good at it. I um, will admit I practiced the harmonica a pretty significant amount behind the wheel on the highway,
yeah.
and I think that's a pretty common one. Practice it waiting for the bus, and when I'm got a couple minutes to spare, and you can get good pretty quickly if you just practice for small amounts of time on a regular basis. And
Is the Marine
yeah,
Band, is that a good starter one?
that's the one. Yeah, get a Marine band in the key of A or G.
A or G? You heard it here,
Yep.
folks. Well, I want to wrap up with a question that I ask every guest. Um, what is a recent zeitgeist moment for you? And I'll explain what this means. So, this is Zeitgeist Radio. Zeitgeist means spirit of the times, and it's kind of
Uh-huh.
a word that's like the feel of an era or a scene or a location, kind of the spirit of. It can be used in politics or fashion or whatever. I use it in music, and I use a
Uh-huh.
zeitgeist moment to refer to that moment that we all have had that I don't know of any other word for, where
Mm-hmm.
you're making music or you're listening to music, you're somehow involved with music, and you just plug in and it just you feel connected. Like all of a sudden something happens and you feel connected to something bigger than yourself. Um,
Sure.
and so I've started calling that a zeitgeist moment. And I always like to ask every guest because everyone has had this experience. So
Yeah.
I'll share one and then I'll ask you about yours. So my zeitgeist moment that I wanted to share with you is so I grew up in Montana and we'd
Mm-hmm.
have these big bonfire parties. Everyone would get together, play music. My brother's playing guitar or upright bass or whatever. There's some folks singing, I'd be singing. Um, and then you knew the night was getting good. You knew you'd hit the sweet spot in the night when my dad had enough beers in him that he felt brave enough to bust out his harmonica.
All
and,
right.
and that was when he's gotten braver as the years go on. But I remember when I was a teenager, it would be like hours in, and finally he'd kind of like get out his harmonica. And something about the way he plays is so soulful. Like he's
Oh.
not necessarily like he hasn't studied with anybody. He just learned on his
Mm-hmm.
own. And something about the way he plays is just so magical. And that moment in the night, you see him get out his harmonica, you're like, oh, we have arrived. This is where the jam is now.
All
Like
right. That's
this is
beautiful.
what makes the magic is my dad and his
Yeah.
harmonica. so so that's a moment for me. I'd be curious to hear from you. What's a zeitgeist, either a recent or a memorable zeitgeist moment for you?
Well, you know what? That I think that's such a beautiful story, and I can really picture what you're describing. I'll give you can I give you two?
Absolutely.
I'll give you one that happened a while ago was when I went to that harmonica conference, and it was like obviously the most amount of harmonica players that I've ever been around at any given point in time, and just yeah, definitely, created the feeling of being part of something greater, and like made the seeing the harmonica community in the flesh meant a lot. And then in a more recent time, just a couple weeks ago, the band I'm in, Ma'am, we had our annual festival, the fourth annual Burning Ma'am in Woodward, Pennsylvania.
Amazing.
And there was a bunch of zeitgeist moments with that. We sort of try to um, use that as an opportunity to bring together all of the amazing bands and musicians that we meet playing on the road and get them all in one place, which is pretty rare for a bunch of musicians who travel all the time. It's tough to get them in all in the same place at once, and it's really special when that happens. And there's another great harmonica player there. His name's Brian Hurd. He has a band called Daddy Longlegs, and we played a couple harmonica duets around the campfire one night, which was pretty special. And it's not often that two people playing the harmonica at the same time sounds not terrible. And I think it sounded pretty good. And it was really cool to, it definitely was a special moment. I had a really great time listening to him and playing harmonica with him as well as all the other great bands. Yeah, that was beautiful, beautiful festival.
That sounds amazing. Well, Nate, thank you so much for your time and thanks for coming on to Zeitgeist Radio.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Zeitgeist Radio. If you'd like to take the next step in your musical journey, head over to zeitgeistacademy.com/radio to join my newsletter. Seriously, it's fun and informative, and I never spam or sell your information. That's zeitgeistacademy.com/radio. Music for this episode was created by Ian Boswell. Please hit that subscribe button and tell all your friends you found a cool new podcast. See you next time.